reporting to you today on safe driving practices using Newton's 3 laws of motion. The first law that we're going to be looking at today is Newton's first law of motion. Newton's first law of motion states that an object in motion will stay in motion and stay at the same speed and in the same direction as long as there are no unbalanced forces acting against it. This also encompasses inertia, since objects will tend to resist change in their states of motion. An example of Newton's first law is the seatbelt. Seatbelts will stop drivers from flying out of their seats by creating an unbalanced force against them. As you can see in the video clip, when the car slammed its brakes, the car stopped moving, but the person inside continued to move forwards, which is the driver that would go through the windshield. The unbalanced force was the seatbelt, which prevented the driver from flying through the window. Did you know the chance of dying in a car crash is reduced by 45% when you wear a seatbelt, and the chance of being seriously injured in a car crash is reduced to 50%? After learning about Newton's first law of motion, a tip to all young drivers is to never drive without a seatbelt. Next, on to Newton's second law. Newton's second law of motion states that a force is equal to the mass times the acceleration. This basically means that the acceleration of an object will depend directly on the net force that's acting upon the object and inversely the mass on the object. An example of this is when two cars crash and one car is significantly larger than the other. When the two cars both crash, the larger car will have a smaller acceleration and a smaller car will have a higher acceleration. This means that the larger car will sustain less damage than the smaller car would. You can see this in the video. As you saw in the previous video, the larger car with the smaller acceleration will cause more damage if you hit something. This is because it has a larger mass. The smaller car has a smaller mass and therefore will have a larger acceleration and won't cause as much damage. Did you know that the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety says that while all cars are very safe, the smallest and lightest car will have 2 times the fatality rate compared to the biggest and heaviest cars? After learning about Newton's second law of motion, my recommendation is that for all young drivers is that you should be mindful of large trucks and buses when you're driving on the road. The last and final law of motion is Newton's third law of motion. This states that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. This means that in every interaction of two objects, there are pairs of forces that are equal and opposite. An example of this is when you turn the corner in the sun versus when you turn the corner in the rain. Whoa! As you saw in the video, when you turn your car in the sun, the friction between the wheels and the road balance out the applied force. When you're driving in the rain and you want to turn, the forces won't be balanced if you go too fast because the road will be slippery and the force of friction will be drastically reduced. Did you know that the risk for fatal car crashes increases by 75% when you're driving in moderate rain? A course of action that I suggest for all teenagers to follow is to drive slower in the rain and snow and when driving around tight corners.